Thank you very much, Tim and Berthard, for organizing this workshop and for including my paper into it. I'm happy to present this paper, and I will be happy to hear your comments. Second. Much of the literature in economics is based on the concept of unintended knowledge spillovers, assuming that firms cannot control the diffusion of knowledge they generate. For example, in the growth literature, it is commonly assumed that once the technology is disclosed in a patent application, it becomes publicly available and everyone can build follow-on innovations based on it. In the urban literature, it is often assumed that technologies are surrounded by tacit knowledge, but this tacit knowledge can be diffused through random face-to-face interactions between inventors. On the empirical side, patent citations have been the prevailing measure of such knowledge spillovers. Citations are used to estimate growth models, to evaluate the localization of spillovers in space, to identify high-quality technologies, to provide policy recommendations, and in many other applications. In this paper, I document several new and puzzling facts about patent citations. In particular, I show that citations are highly concentrated and primarily come from business partners. For example, this patent from IBM is one of the most cited patents granted in the United States. Yet almost all of its citations come from one input supplier core technology. This example is puzzling because a valuable technology disclosed in a public patent file would be expected to generate spillovers across a broader set of firms, not just to one input supplier. And yet I show that this pattern is quite general in the patent data. On the graph here, I take top 1% of the most cited patents granted in the United States. Specifically, within each grant year and within each technological class, I take top 1% of the most cited patents where I trace citations within a 5-year window. And many papers interpret the most cited patents as the most valuable ones because they generate most knowledge spillovers. But you can see that even for these patents, most citations just come from one firm only. Patents granted before 2000 received around 50% of their citations from one firm only, and this has increased up to 77% for the most cited patents granted in 2014. I'll show that this pattern is quite robust to different sample definitions, to different definitions of concentration measure. It's not specific to the most cited patents. We can trace citations at the firm level. We can trace all citations and measure them through Herfindahl index. I will talk more about this, but this pattern is quite robust. Concentration is very high of citations in a sense that it is significantly higher relative to what we would expect if citations were random. And this concentration has increased over time. So who are these firms that are making citations to each other? I collect data on various inter-firm relationships between publicly traded companies, and I show that at least in a set of publicly traded US companies, around 76% of citations occur between business partners. Most of these business partners, most citations happen between suppliers, customers, and firms with research collaboration. So having established these facts, then I document multiple additional facts about patent citations, trying to understand what they mean, but in general, trying to understand what do these patterns tell us about how firms protect their intellectual property and what changed over time. And I show suggestive evidence that instead of involuntary spillovers, citations are more likely to reflect cooperation and intentional knowledge sharing between business partners. Specifically, I provide the following mechanism and show that I will propose several theories of what patent citations might mean, and one of the theories fits the data best. This theory is the following. I argue that firms often do not disclose all information about their technologies and patent files. Instead, they leave a lot of complementary knowledge private in the form of trade secrets. They share these secrets only with a few business partners. And these partners have an advantage relative to others in creating follow-on innovations. And as a result, these partners are more likely to make citations. So the reason why core technology makes so many citations to IBM's patent while other companies do not make citations to IBM is because core knows more about this technology relative to other firms. IBM shared some trade secrets with it. A good example of how firms bundle trade secrets with patents with trade secrets is a COVID vaccine. When Biden administration announced that they would support a waiver of intellectual property rights for COVID vaccine, many IP lawyers argued that the information disclosed in patent files is not enough even for the replication of the messenger RNA technology. you need also to have access to technical know-how and trade secrets about this technology, and firms will be reluctant to share it for free. I will show you how we can systematically find patents that were bundled with trade secrets using trade secret litigation data. So given this interpretation of patent citations, the rise in the concentration reflects the decline in cooperation and intentional knowledge sharing among business partners. And I'll propose one possible explanation for it. I argue that over time, the risks and costs of trade secret misappropriation has increased, and this decreased firms' incentives for knowledge sharing with their business partners. And I will also use trade with China as a potential source of exogenous variation across technologies, and shows that technologies more exposed to trade with China experienced a higher growth in the concentration of citations. So why should we care about these results? There are at least two implications of this result. First, I argue that the role of, we might overestimate the role of involuntary knowledge spillovers relative to intentional knowledge sharing as a mechanism for the knowledge diffusion in the economy. And as a result, some innovation policies that are designed to address the problem of knowledge externalities, such as R&D subsidies, might be ineffective. Second, the evidence in this paper provides a new interpretation to some of the existing facts in the literature. For example, the localization of citations in space is often interpreted as the evidence for the localization of knowledge spillovers in space. For example, inventors need to constant face-to-face interactions with each other in order for knowledge spillovers to be realized. But actually, the evidence in this paper, the fact that citations mostly come from business partners and they're highly concentrated, suggests that the localization of citations might be a consequence of the co-location of business partners in space. If anything, Alfred Marshall proposed several theories of why we might see the agglomeration of economic activity. One of these theories was about knowledge spillovers, and another theory was about the collocation of business partners. And at least we cannot use patent citations alone to differentiate these two stories. So let me jump into the data. I use several data sources. I use patent data from PatentsView from 1976 to 2019. In most empirical exercises, I will use patents assigned to both publicly traded and private companies. And in some exercises, I will use patents assigned to non-corporate patents, for example, patents assigned to universities. But when I measure relationships, I collected data on business relationships only for publicly traded companies, starting from 2003 to 2022. This data includes relationships such as suppliers and customers, research collaboration, patent licensing, joint ventures, and some other forms of relationships. So in all exercises where I document something about relationships between firms, I will focus on a sample of publicly traded companies. Third, to show that patents, to find patents that were bundled with trade secrets and estimate how this bundling with trade secrets affects patent citations, I use trade secret litigation data from Lex Machina. And finally, on the China shock, I will use international trade data from Otter et al. Okay, so the first fact that I would like to show is that the concentration is highly robust. And here I just show some exercises that I did, but in general, I have a long online appendix with many possible concentration measures you can imagine. Okay, not all, but many. I guess the main point of this robustness exercises is that there are a lot of concerns about patent data. For example, some citations are added by patent examiners, citations might be added by patent lawyers. So in general, there are lots of concerns that citations do not reflect knowledge flows at all. So I try to address many of these concerns. For example, if we focus only on citations from examiners, the concentration is much lower. And actually the concentration of citations coming from examiners is consistent with what we would observe if citations were random. So the concentration is driven by citations from non-examiners. On patent lawyers, I use lawyers who worked in several companies to separate the role of lawyers and firms in terms of who is making citations. I show that a lawyer who worked in company A and company B and cited some patents in company A essentially stopped citing these patents in company B. So I won't talk a lot about robustness checks, but in general, I spend a lot of time trying to show that these patterns in the patent data provide some valuable information. But this valuable information is not about knowledge spillovers. It's information about cooperation between firms. I propose several theories of what citations might mean. In all these theories, I assume that citations reflect some knowledge flows between firms. The first two theories are theories of knowledge spillovers. For example, the first theory I call spillovers and specialization. According to this theory, all information is disclosed in a patent file, but citations are concentrated because of the specialization of firms. So imagine that Amcor technology is responsible for so many citations to IBM because Amcor specializes in a particular narrow technological space. In this space, IBM's patent is valuable, while for all other firms, although they could potentially have used this patent, this technology is not valuable. So simply, Amcor has more patents in a particular narrow technological space than other firms, and as a result, we see lots of citations from Amcor and not from other firms. So this theory was commonly used. So the specialization part was not used, but the interpretation of patents as knowledge spillovers coming from information disclosed in patents was used in the literature on endogenous economic growth. Now, the second theory is about interactions between inventors. Imagine that not all information is disclosed in patent files. There are still lots of tacit knowledge, and this tacit knowledge has to be shared. But it can be shared through random interactions between inventors, and firms have limited control over these interactions. So according to this theory, IBM's inventors communicate exclusively with Amcor's inventors, and as a result, Amcor's inventors make lots of citations to IBM. And this communication has nothing to do with their relationship. For example, their buildings are close to each other. Okay, so this is the second theory. The third and the fourth theory are based on theory of cooperation, that the citations do not measure knowledge spillovers, but they reflect some cooperation between firms. The third theory is about licensing. Imagine that IBM has a very strong patent, and nobody can really create follow-on innovations without infringing it. And IBM licenses this patent only to Amcor for some reasons. Then, as a result, Amcor makes lots of citations, while other firms don't make citations to IBM because they're trying to avoid this technology. They will likely to infringe IBM's patent. And the final theory is based on the view of trade secret sharing. That is, imagine that IBM's patent is surrounded by some trade secrets. Not everything is disclosed in the patent file, but IBM shares these secrets only with Amcor technology and not with other firms. And as a result, Amcor makes lots of citations to IBM, while other firms not. In order to test for these theories, I use several techniques. So for the first theory, suppose that we assume that indeed there is specialization in technologies. So citations are concentrated because just Amcor has more patents than other companies in this technological space, and only Amcor benefits from this, from IBM's patent. To test for this theory, I do the following. I find essentially all patents that are very similar to Amcor's patents. They come from the same, and by the way, I'm talking about the example IBM and Amcor, but in general, I'm doing it for all patents in the patent data. So let's find all patents that are very similar to Amcor's patents, similar in a sense they come from the same application year, from the same narrow technological class, and actually also textually very similar to what Amcor is doing. So I'm trying to find all patents that could have potentially made citations to IBM, that could have potentially benefit from IBM's patent, but they didn't make citations. So if Amcor is the only firm that is specializes in this technology, we should not find lots of patents in other companies that are very similar to Amcor's patents. So when we do this exercise, when we find patents that actually make citations to IBM and patents that could have potentially made citations to IBM, I randomize citations. So if Amcor is the only firm that specializes in this technology, even under random citations, we would observe the concentration of citations. So what you can see here, the blue line shows the actual concentration of citations, and these lines show what we would observe if citations were random according to different ways to randomize citations. You can see that the actual concentration is significantly higher relative to what we would expect if citations were random, and the difference between the two increased. But in words, it just means that Amcor is responsible for so many citations to IBM not because it has more patents than other companies. Actually, it has less patents than other companies in its technology, but because a large share of its patents make citations to IBM, while other companies with similar patents make 0 citations to IBM. So using controls for trying to find similar technologies to AMCOR, I'm arguing that this specialization is unlikely to explain the concentration of citations. Now, what about inventors? Is it possible that it's all the story about human capital, that IBM's inventors communicate exclusively with AMCOR's inventors, and as a result, they make lots of citations to IBM? In order to test for this theory, I use the movement of inventors across firms and try to separate the role of firms and inventors in citations. So focusing on the example of IBM and AMCOR, let's find all inventors who made citations to IBM, and among these inventors, let's find inventors who moved to other companies and continue doing very similar research, filing very similar patents. I show that once inventors from AMCOR move to another company, they essentially stop citing IBM, or formally, the probability of a citation significantly decreases. Formally, now I compute the concentration of citations within inventors who worked at different companies. And I show that the concentration is significantly higher relative to what we would expect if citations were random. An example here, I couldn't find an example with IBM and AMCOR because nobody moved from AMCOR. But an example is Stefan Schreck, who worked in 2 companies. He made citations to this red patent. He worked in one company, Endalogics Inc. He filed for 16 patents. In 15 of these 16 patents, he made citations to the red patent. Then he moved to Edwards Life Sciences Corp. He filed for 9 patents and made 0 citations to the red patent. So this is a general pattern in the patent data. When inventors move, they start citing different patents. Now, what about, so these were 2 theories of spillovers. I'm trying to argue that citations are unlikely to measure spillovers, or at least if they measure spillovers, these are very spillovers within very narrow technological space that I cannot measure. What about business partners? So on business partners, I have data at the firm level on business relationships. So it's useful now to redefine. I don't have business relationship data at the patent level. So if I see that AMCOR cites IBM, I know that AMCOR is an input supplier to IBM, but I don't see how exactly the relationship is governed at the patent level. So I redefine the concentration measure at the firm level. It has the same, as I said in the introduction, it has the same pattern. The concentration is high and is increased over time. I have data only for the period after 2001. So I focus on the sample after 2001. And I ask the question, to what extent the concentration can be explained by partners? So here I reproduce the blue line is just the concentration of citations, the actual concentration of citations starting from 2001 to 2014. And the Herfindahl index has this nice property that it's additive. You can just separate it into citations from partners and citations from other firms. So we can do it, and you can see that the concentration and almost all of its rise is driven by citations from partners. That is, the rise in the concentration is primarily explained by changes in how business partners cite each other. Citations from other firms had almost no impact. Actually, we can do it also at the industry level. If you don't have data on business relationships, but you have data on the industry affiliation, you can also separate citations coming from the same industry, the red line here, or coming from different industries. And the rise in the concentration of citations is primarily driven by changes in how firms from different industries change their citation behavior. Okay, so what exactly does it mean that there were changes in how business partners cite each other? It means the following. Over time, the number of citing partners declined, even though the overall number of partners increased. So in other words, I used to receive citations from 5 of my input suppliers. Now I receive citations from 2 of my input suppliers. And as a result, the concentration went up. There were almost no changes in terms of how other firms, non-partnering firms like competitors, change their citation behavior to us. I also did a similar analysis at the intensive margin. And even within firms that continue citing me, the distribution of citations became much more skewed. Now, who are these partners that are making citations to each other? So as you remember, I proposed two theories of how knowledge flows can be mediated through market transactions. One is licensing story, that is, I license a patent to you, you are allowed to create follow-on innovations based on my patent, and you will make citations to me. If I don't license a patent to you, you don't want to create follow-on innovations based on my technology. So that was one theory. So here I separate partners based on their relationship with the firm. What you can see from here is that at least firms with reported licensing agreements account for only 14% of citations. Most citations happen between suppliers and customers and firms with research collaboration. And I want to be upfront here. It is possible that the data that I use on business relationship is based on public disclosure on these relationships. So it is possible that firms might have great incentives to disclose their suppliers and customers rather than firms with licensing agreements. But still, given the data that I have, licensing agreements cannot explain a lot of citations. Even if I have some mistakes in the data, even there are errors, it's still not clear why don't we license our technology to all partners. Suppose that I have 10 input suppliers. Why do I license it only to 2 input suppliers, not to all of them? And what exactly has changed over time? Why over time I stopped licensing to some of my partners? So I find it a little bit difficult to explain the concentration and its rise from the licensing perspective. I find it much easier to explain it from a trade secret perspective. That is, if I have 10 input suppliers, I don't want to share my secrets with all of them because I will be very exposed to trade secret misappropriation. So I will selectively share only partners who I can trust, and I share with my knowledge only with them. What changed over time? I became more concerned about trade secret misappropriation, and now I share knowledge with a fewer number of partners. So finally, how am I on time? Okay. So finally, how can we show that indeed patents are bundled with trade secrets and these somehow affect citations? Secrets are not observable by definition. So what I do, I find patents that were involved in trade secret litigation. A good example here is the case Waymo versus Uber. Waymo is a subsidiary of Google that is developing self-driving cars. There was a famous case of how a former engineer from Waymo, Anthony Lewandowski, left the company, stole trade secrets, founded another company, and sold this company to Uber. And yeah, so this was a famous case of trade secret misappropriation. But what is less known is that this case also had patent infringement claims. In the legal complaint, Waymo describes that they had that Uber not only stole their trade secrets, but also infringed their patents, and these patents were complementary to their trade secrets. So what I do empirically, I find all patents that were involved in trade secret litigation, and for them I find control patents that were involved in patent litigation only without trade secret claims, and I compare the distribution of citations for these two groups of patents. In the paper, I show that patents that were involved in trade secret litigation have more concentrated citations relative to patents that were involved only in patent litigation. The interpretation here is that patents that were involved in trade secret litigation are more likely to be bundled with some other trade secrets relative to patents that were involved in pure patent litigation. So to sum up, I propose several theories of what citations mean, but I don't want you to think about this as paper about patent citations. It's just how exactly do firms protect the intellectual property rights, and how exactly do they share knowledge with their business partners? There are several possible theories, and I have some evidence. Based on these theories and evidence, I find the last theory of trade secret sharing as the most compelling one. Now, what changed over time? I argue that one potential reason of why potential cause of the decline in cooperation among firms might be that there are higher risks and costs of trade secret misappropriation. Imagine that I want to share my secrets with an input supplier. With some probability, my secrets will be leaked to my competitor, and there will be some cost to me. So over time, either this probability went up or this cost went up. I have less incentives to share secrets with my supplier. In order to provide some evidence supporting it, I use trade with China. And I argue that China, technologies that were more exposed to trade with China, they faced a greater competition. So the cost of trade secret misappropriation went up. And also it's possible that there is now higher probability of trade secret misappropriation in technologies more exposed to import competition from China. So formally, I show that I divide all patents into technological classes. For each technological class, I compute the concentration of citations, and I show that technologies more exposed to import competition from China experienced a higher growth in the concentration of citations. I use the IV method from Otter et al. China syndrome paper, where instrument imports from China by Chinese exports to other high-income markets. But I also do some placebo exercises. For example, I show that China shock affected the concentration of citations only for corporate patents and not for university or government patents. So overall, China can explain to some extent the rise in the concentration of citations, but I want to be upfront, it cannot fully explain the whole rise after 2001. So in conclusion, the main conclusion is that patent citations are more likely to reflect intentional knowledge sharing rather than unintended spillovers. Over time, we see the decline in the cooperation among firms. One potential reason for this might be that there was an increase in the risk and cost of trade secret misappropriation. And it has also implications for how we think about innovation policy and how we think in general about the knowledge diffusion in the economy. Thank you.